Welcome to the Backyard Professor Live. We're doing a special Saturday edition because tomorrow is Father's Day, and I didn't even think about that. So when I asked the Tedesco brothers, who are good friends of this channel, they said, hey, let's do it Saturday, not Sunday. I said, oh, of course. So here we are going live, and I have the Tedesco brothers. Now, these two probably need no introduction, but I'm going to introduce them real quick. This is John, and this is Jerry.
John, Jerry,
and Carrie. So we're you guys now tell me about. We've been talking this last week, and I got telling them about my contact in the desert. And you guys, did you attend that meeting, SCU thing? Is that what you were telling me?
Yes, we attended it virtually. John, I think John caught most of it from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I didn't catch it Friday, but I did catch it on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, so Friday was more or less the introductions. That started late.
Yeah,
so the bulk of the program was basically the conference was Saturday and into part of Sunday actually.
Yeah,
Sunday, I think they ended up at sometime around 3:00.
And Friday, I think it was a keynote speaker. I think was Jay Stratton.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I missed that one.
Yeah.
So you guys wanted to kind of discuss what you heard and some of the information. So I'm just going to let you take over, and why don't you tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly, and let's see what is going on.
Sure, that sounds good. There were a few speakers we thought were that brought something new to the table. It was interesting. There was a section for law enforcement first responders who would come across these kinds of objects, and that was a presentation that was given by Dr. Keith Taylor and Sean Grosner. And they did actually a pretty good presentation. They talked about the everything from safety protocols, personal protective equipment that might be required by police officers who come upon these close proximity object, detection equipment, and of course the interesting thing is we've been helping in that area. John and I are both part of the UAPDF, the Disclosure Fund, and we work with the Safety Policy Working Group, which is mostly police officers and researchers who are concerned about first responders having the the equipment they need for detection and the safety safeguards they may need in case they're exposed to radiation or electromagnetic energies.
Right. So yeah, emissions and that sort of thing. Yeah. It's and I think some of the stuff was actually brought up by Rich Lang as well in previous meetings.
Yeah, Richard Lang. He's an aerospace expert who's also he's been a researcher for quite a few years.
Right.
He's involved in this.
Yeah. So I mean, it was the information was very, very detailed. Sean basically laid out the forensics approaches and so on. It's went into very, very specific details as far as conducting research, the evidence chain and so forth. So we found it to be extremely interesting and certainly beneficial to any researcher out there. But something like that, I think brings a lot to the table. Anybody that any newcomers to it, and of course you get a different, you get a different look and different spin.
Yeah, different perspectives.
Yeah.
Did they indicate that anybody that people have been injured when they're approaching stuff like that, or the reason why they're trying to? Seems to me like they're trying to emphasize safety as well. Now, is this for fallen UFOs and craft like that? Is that what they're talking about?
Yes. Everything from UFOs to even objects that we might call drones. Coming up on a possible drone or drone-like object.
Right. No specific cases, but they, like I said, did go into detail about the research and so forth.
And there was, I mean, some of the things they were more concerned about is there's been cases of flash burns to the eyes, That's something we discussed with them. It has to do with the possibility of ultraviolet radiation being emitted by some of these objects. Within I would say with 2,000 feet.
Yeah, close proximity. Like Gerald says, you certainly want to be aware of it within, generally within a quarter of a mile. This is a very specific band of radiation too in the UV. This is UVC. That's of concern. It's certainly invisible. Before you know it, in a short period of time, you end up with surface burns on your eyes. The corneas can be burned, without some kind of protection, some kind of eye protection.
And there's actually a precedent for it. There's a case that goes back to, I believe it was 1970, 78 or 79. It was called the Val Johnson case. It was a sheriff who, I think it was like maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. It was in, I believe it was Missouri, that he came upon an object, an orb-like object that was hovering over a highway. He approached it thinking it was a small plane that was downed. And as he approached it, this object actually was hovering over those and shot towards the vehicle. And he went unconscious. The vehicle went off the road. The last thing he says he remembered, it was shattering glass, the windshield shattering. And when EMS responded and some of the other law enforcement responded to it, he was regaining consciousness, and he was taken to a hospital. He had what looked like welder's burns to his eyes, and because the sheriff
flash burns, right?
Flash burns to his eyes,
right.
And this was Sheriff Val Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
It was still, luckily it was temporary. They had bandaged his eyes. There was damage to the patrol car, which is quite interesting. That's something we're looking at. We're doing a detailed dive into that, because the damage path of where the car took, and the damage on the car is quite interesting. It's very unique.
Right. Yeah,
that's kind of interesting. So he had gotten out of his vehicle and had gone up to get closer. So he was burned, and then there's something happened to his vehicle.
No, actually, he was burned as his car was. He was going down that highway to approach the object. The object actually aggressively moved towards his patrol car, and it shot towards his windshield. The last remembrance was coming towards his windshield, and it looks like a road over the car. And he went unconscious. He went off, lost control of the car, went off the side of the road, or it was pushed off the side of the road. Our thought is based on the damage to the car and some of the damage to the metal, the hood of the car, and there's a debris field. It looks like something may have there was a force supply to the car that forced it off the road. It caused the metal of the hood to buckle, and create fractures in the windshield, consistent with a frequency based on whatever energy, electromagnetic force was applied.
Right. And this could have been created by eddy currents within the metal.
Right.
Eddy currents are they're basically magnetic fields, as self-polarizing, and they counter the field that actually produced it. But these forces, they interact in waves, and what can happen is you get this buckling effect, which could also have cracked the windshield the way it did, these unique fractures in the windshield, and that's what we believe this thing produced. It produced a frequency that we actually we looked at the pitch of the cracks, and we determined that they're under a certain wavelength, which we believe might have been something around 3 gigahertz, that caused these unique fracture patterns. But as far as the burns to his eyes and so forth, we believe that he might have had the window open at that time, the driver's side window, because glass generally has a barrier. It's a safety barrier with UVC, if UVC radiation, because anything at all, even a small plastic glass, plastic glasses or something that's made out of glass, it blocks like 99% of the UV, that exposure.
So this object that approached his vehicle. Now, I'm not trying to ask dumb questions. I just want to help distinguish. Is there any way that a helicopter or something could cause that?
No.
unless it was shooting. Do helicopters shoot UV beams for any reason?
No.
Do they carry UV or anything?
No, the only thing you could produce by helicopter would be a downwash. You know, if downwash of the rotors, disturbing the ground, but there wouldn't be enough to disturb it to that degree. There was actually dents in the hood of the car. There were impact fractures to the windshield and to the lenses, the headlight lenses, due to material being picked up off the road. We believe there was a force that was generated from this object moving forward towards the patrol car, and it picked up this debris on the street, whether pebbles, stones, whatever was on the street, and flung it towards the patrol car at a high rate of speed. And these are impact dents. It was a lot of force applied. The other thing is the antennas on the patrol car. I mean, this car is it's preserved. It's in a museum. It's great because it's a piece of evidence that was preserved exactly as it was. Yeah. And we actually wanted at one time, at some point, we'd love to fly over to Missouri and take a look at the patrol car. We had the photographs that we looked at, and like I says, it was they're very interesting. The antennas on the patrol car, there's one on the I believe on the hood and one on the rear, and they're both bent on right angles, on sharp angles. And the interesting thing about the antennas is one is bent a little more than the other. And if you had an object that was rolling, let's say it was heading towards the car and it was rolling over it, and it was generating a counter electromotive force, and it was being applied to the metals on the car, even the antenna, the antenna on the car, this force could be able to bend the antennas on those kind of sharp angles. And the interesting thing is these antennas, they're not kinked. Normally, those type of times, if you try to bend them yourself, you would kink the area where it folds in would kink.
Right, especially
these aren't. These are still conical.
Right, right. Yeah, especially hollowed thin aluminum.
Yeah.
If you took
and they did not kink.
No, they didn't kink.
They bent.
Yep.
Right.
And they bent on these very sharp angles. And one, of course, more of a sharper bend than the other on the hood of the car, based on the distance of something that might have flew over the patrol car.
Right. I mean, this is something that could be produced by something called the Lorentz force, and a Lorentz force is something that is it's all. If you looked at you talk to electricians and that, everybody remembers the right-hand rule, electromagnetism. We have an electric field which is perpendicular to the magnetic field. Lorentz force is a force in another triangle, the third angle, and that's a downward force. So if you looked at it hand wise, you'd have I don't know if it's hard. There we go. So you have an electric field, you have a magnetic field, and then you have something up here called the Lorentz force. So that acts downward, and we believe that Lorentz force is what caused the bending of this metal.
Yeah.
And when you have an induced magnetic field, a changing magnetic field like that, aluminum is a non-ferrous material, but that aluminum can generate electric currents within it, which are counter to the actual field.
And these are called eddy currents.
So the eddy currents, and you get these opposing fields, like two poles on a magnet that are basically a north and a north pole, or a south and a south pole. You try putting those magnets together, they force each other apart. And we believe that this is what had been created is this opposing force by the antenna that was self-induced. It's these currents that were generated from this field. I think we might be getting a little off the topic here, but
it's an interesting thing. It's something that wasn't really explored in depth before. There was some cursory examinations of the car. I don't think they were very thorough, or they were thorough enough. But there's something that we took a good look at, and we're still looking at it. I think the damaged path that the car was exposed to was consistent with this electromagnetic counter-motive force that we call Lorentz force that might have the damaged. That would be something that would cause the buckling of the hood. Then you have if you pick up the debris from the grounds, from a propulsion system, that would be a debris create the debris field that would be consistent with the damage we see on the car. The other thing is the fractures in the windshield are very interesting. We have what's called radial linear fractures that soften the hood and they work their way up. And that's usually from the buckling of the hood. It causes a fracture at the base of the windshield, and they radiate in these linear patterns. They're called radial fractures. Then we have what we're called concentric fractures. They're round, and they're almost like targets. Circular fractures in the windshield. Those are due to impacts from debris. So you have two fractures.
Did his windshield have both of those?
Yes, they have both, which is very interesting because now you have impact fractures and you have a radial fracture pattern.
The thing flew over his car, right?
Yes.
It didn't actually hit his car.
No, it appears to have flown over the car, and whatever the force was, this electromotive force, probably the flexing of the hood probably fractured the windshield.
Right. And at that wavelength, that distance apart, those radial patterns that you see, those fracture patterns, they're kind of equidistant from each other.
Yes,
they're evenly spaced, and if you looked at that distance, it kind of conforms to the wavelength of an electromagnetic frequency, somewhere around 3 gigahertz.
Yeah,
so this seems to be a magic number.
You guys are incredible. So what you're trying to tell me is, I mean, the bottom line is this is not just regular damage from
no,
just normal. Would we be safe in saying this particular case has some anomalies? And then, of course, it's he was hurt also with his eyes. Did he have anything wrong with his skin or hair or?
No, from what we understand, the medical report just said it was flash burns to his eyes. The physician had described trauma that was consistent with. It said it looked almost like welder's burns, and this was 3 o'clock.
Someone in the comments said something to that effect too. Keep talking, and I'll try to find that because there's apparently a couple of other people in the comments who are familiar with what you're saying, and that's really kind of cool.
Well, what's interesting is they did have automotive engineers that looked at the car and they couldn't account for the damage. They said they were mystified.
Right. It's, especially that the bending of the aluminum at roughly 90-degree angles, that doesn't produce any stress fractures in the metal itself. The kinking. Like I said, that's really unusual. And the only thing I can contribute that to was some kind of an eddy current, eddy current fields that produced it. And this is the same principle for maglev trains too. I mean, you have these trains that are basically, have these opposing forces that lift the train off the track, and you got to glide. They basically glide along the track because of this, these Lorentz, this powerful Lorentz force that's created by these fields.
And so I think it's something that most people, I don't know how many people are really familiar with. I don't think it's really taught routinely in science classes. I mean, they teach the electric fields and electromagnetic fields being perpendicular to each other, but there's a third force, and that's what we're talking about. This Lorentz force.
It's always accompanied with the Lorentz force.
This gentleman here says he's experienced eye burning from observing an object half a mile away. Good grief. I wouldn't want it to get closer to me to give me a good video or picture in some regards. Then maybe we do want him to be far away because we may not be prepared. What's cool is this actual topic was addressed and discussed in this conference, and it's something that I have never thought about. Here I am saying, I'm ready for an orb to come down, or I'm ready for a ship to come zipping over the horizon and come and land in front of me and say greetings, Earthling, and all that. But wait a minute, their technology may have. And it's not that they're trying to harm us, but their technology may have some harm, and we might have to be better prepared. That is quite fascinating.
Right, and this is the reason why we're bringing up this example.
Really cool.
Yeah, so you may have, this possible indirect harm, even if it's unintentional.
Unintentional, yeah. There's the word. Right. Thank you. Yeah, well said. So, okay, so I've got a quick question from one of my audience members, and I am curious too. I just heard about this week, and I'm not quite sure what to make of it because now I can't find it. Oh, here we go. Yeah, Robert Nunley. He's a good He's a good friend of mine in the comments a lot. He says, have the brothers heard of quantum tunneling communication? Supposedly there's a group in Europe using this to talk to entities.
Right. I think that was recently on a podcast with
It was with Professor Simon, I think.
Yeah, it's Professor Simon, right.
Who was he? I think it was with Patrick Abedid.
Yes, exactly.
He had him on.
Yeah. I've heard of the quantum tunneling. I'm not very familiar with it.
I'm not either.
Yeah.
Maybe something to do with entanglement. When you get to the quantum, you're in the world of the weird, so you got to really tread softly. And I am attempting in my meager way to get caught up on the newest quantum information as it relates to ET, the UFOs. But it would be fun if someone would to somehow find a way to upgrade all of this for us. But quantum physics itself is still just bizarre, man. I had enough trouble getting my mind around relativity when I was in college those years ago. In my spare time, I was reading every single book on Einstein I could get my flipping hands on, and I still never got through it very well. But
what they called spooky action at a distance.
That was fascinating.
It is. It's, and I mean, it just seems like it's not like the subject isn't woo enough or difficult enough, this phenomenon, but everybody keeps wanting to bring in quantum. And how well do we understand quantum? I don't, but I'm working on it. But holy cow, this stuff gets weird quick. That's why you're so valuable, because you can, at least for now, keep it in the realm of the scientifically plausible,
right,
probable, and at least from a 3D perspective. I'm starting to read literature now that is talking about, Whitley Strieber in the fourth mind, he's getting into the fourth dimension. They're going off into other dimensions. I'm going, okay, whoa. I haven't even hardly conquered the third yet, So that was interesting. So what else did you guys hear that you want to talk about there?
There was they also discussed they had Ben Hansen as a presenter there, and I think most people are familiar that he's a former FBI agent who's been on quite a few of the UFO, UAP documentaries that have been on various channels. But he gave a presentation. He did an investigation of a case that occurred in Connecticut. It was with a police officer who observed an orb of light. It was in Fairfield County, Connecticut. He observed an orb of light that appeared over his patrol car. This was I forget what time it is. It was late at night, I think, and it had shined a light and lit up his patrol car. And it was at a relatively close distance, within a couple hundred feet, a few hundred feet, and as he observed it, he grabbed his flashlight and tried to shine a light at it. He said it was because the light was kind of blinding, and he said it shot off, or it changed positions from being over his patrol car to being over a reservoir, a body of water, a distance away. And when he saw it appear over the reservoir, he took out his cell phone camera and he actually recorded a video clip of that.
Right, but it was instantaneous. I mean,
yeah,
the movement, it wasn't something that you could follow with your eyes, according to to his description. It was just there. It went from, like Gerald said, from his patrol car over to the other side of this reservoir, and in an instant. And
the presentation was called the Fairfield, Connecticut Reservoir and Plasmoid, a field and video analysis case study. And Ben had presented the case, his investigation, and he had a scientist. Let's see, who's a scientist?
I think it's part of the SCU.
Doctor, yeah, it was a scientist part of the SCU. It was a Dr. Doug Buettner. But they did a full investigation. They found other witnesses who had seen this object, were correlated with what the police officer saw. the video clip is actually pretty interesting. It looks similar to some of the objects we were seeing.
Right, and this was shown on News Nation at the time, I believe. The video.
Yeah,
clip,
News Nation did
you
a coverage
which
of it.
was from his.
Yeah,
from
there's
police
people
officers.
saying that they are familiar with this story. That's kind of
Right.
they remember it
Yeah.
on the news.
Yeah,
So
so
that's
they
why he's putting it in a presentation now as well. So he's got a video clip at least when it was over the reservoir.
Yes.
exactly.
So
Yes.
this orb shined a light on him, right?
Yes.
Did I
Yeah,
get
it was straight. Yeah, it was straight down supposedly, and
that?
it lit up
From above,
it
yeah.
lit up inside the car, but he said it looked like it was truncated at times.
It looked like it was very controlled. The light.
A very controlled beam, where the distance of the beam was actually very determined. It was a truncated beam. It didn't flood the ground or anything like that, but it
just
did
the
light
car.
up the inside of the car.
Just the car, yeah.
Now, I have never, this is new to me, and it's not like I know it all, I promise, but an orb shooting a beam of light into a vehicle, or even just shooting a beam of light, I've never heard of that before. Is this isn't a regular thing we see with orbs, is it?
There's been some other cases with orb-like objects or other types of objects shining lights into cars or shining lights down on an area like maybe a field, an agricultural field with cattle on it. There's been periodic cases like that, but I don't think it's that often.
Yeah, but it doesn't. In many of these cases, that the descriptions doesn't present like a beam of light. I mean, it's the beam of light is normally it hits the ground, it floods the ground. You get this reflective. You get the incident rays. Of course, you flood the ground with light. There's been times where the beam is very controlled in one spot, and other times it doesn't illuminate the ground at all. It's just like I said before, it's just truncated.
Almost like light that's polarized. It's pointed in one single direction.
Right, polarized light, but it's also it seems to have a distance of reflection.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
So did you guys know that this is a fantasy? UFOs are a scam.
Oh yeah, that's was it the Wall Street Journal article?
Right.
Yeah, that's
very interesting.
So
you guys are chasing the scams. You haven't seen anything. None of your instrumentation means diddly squat.
Right.
Yep.
We ignore that.
The Air Force obviously spent a lot of trouble trying to perpetrate a hoax.
Right. Yeah.
Even using
that was really good.
It's funny. He's even using EMPs to shut down to see if they could shut down missile silos with nuclear warheads that would take out most of the area. I mean, that sounds safe. We thought it sounds it's pretty ridiculous. I think at this point.
Yeah, well, and I think Dolan's idea that their timing is intentional simply because Congress is re-ramping up to get that group together to investigate. So what else did you find that was so interesting in this? That is so no damage was done to anybody in that event, was it? The light shining down in the car and all that?
No, there was no permanent damage and no
health issues according to him, I guess. And other than the light being intense, the beam being intense.
But Ben did a good job. Ben did a good job in the investigation, finding the other witnesses. The scientists that he brought out doing the analysis, what they did an analysis on the orb of light when it was over the reservoir. It cast a reflection down the water, and it created an incident angle, a reflection of the light on an angle.
Yeah, I just want to say that they made a comparison with a drone. They were flying a drone out there. They actually had a helicopter up there as well, but they were calculating this angle, which is called the Brewster angle, on the water as a reflection. Looking at the incident angle, which is perpendicular to the surface of the water, and of course you get that elongated response. so they can determine its angle, its altitude, its elevation, I should say, and the exact direction of where that light was coming from. I'll say the research was well done, you know, I mean, offers some more information, some more clues to what they were seeing. They also talked about the light itself, which some of it, seemed to have some of the same chromatic effects that we've been seeing out in the field as well. In certain cases, it seemed
sorry to interrupt you, but when you say chromatic effects, are you hinting about you've told me on other times on other shows that I've had you on that there is a blue and a red aspect of
exactly.
Is the Doppler effect, the spinning issue? Is that what you're meaning?
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So we're suggesting that this could be some kind of gravitational lensing around these objects.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Some of the stuff that they talked about,
So you're not the only one seeing that.
No. And this is something we looked at early on too. When we heard this report, we actually did go into detail with the video that was provided by News Nation, and we went frame by frame with it. We were looking for these characteristic light reflections and changes to the object as it was in rotation, and we were able to basically identify some of the same things that we've been seeing out here in Long Island for almost 4 years now.
And we've looked at other videos with really good sources. One from a police officer that was handed us a video that they had taken. We also had examined the video that was taken by military private contractors,
right.
Which we met with several times.
Which we can't talk about. But there was also a flight crew down in Florida.
Yeah,
that had taken a video from out of passenger window with a cell phone, and very, very distinct chromatic. Glinting, if you want to call it glinting.
You guys have seen that video?
Yes. It was a good video. It was taken by the flight crew, by the flight attendant, who was and the entire flight crew had seen it.
So let me ask you something real quick. You don't get that. You wouldn't. Have you ever seen that same chromatic aspect on any videos or in real life if it's involving anything that we would have made, like a helicopter or a jet or a balloon or anything? You wouldn't get that kind of aberration, would you?
Nothing. Yeah, nothing at all.
Yeah, nothing close to that.
I can't imagine what would cause it other than so would you say your suspicion, or at least the physics, is causing, because it's spinning at a higher rate, that's causing that chromatic aberration?
I don't think it has to do with the rate of spin. I think it has more to do with what's happening around the object, the distortion of the atmosphere itself.
Oh, that's right. The gravitational
which is causing a lensing effect of light.
I mean, the spin can have some effects on that lensing effect. If we're talking about this gravitational field, we're talking as a propulsion method. The spin may also be causing this changes of light, and the different and the transitions and changes of light.
And that would be related to its unique shape, a polyhedral shape that you see there.
Yeah. Right.
So
our I'm just trying to establish our helicopters or our drones are not going to cause that kind of distortion of the atmosphere itself. I mean, we hear the sound of the blades whirring and all that. It makes sound and all, but this is something in a class all its own. Would that be a statement to make?
Right, and this, I mean, if you've studied this as like we have, and we pay particular attention to certain characteristics about this light, and one of them, like I say, is this red and blue shifting, that seems to take place. Although you can see other color hues in there and so forth, but this is very specific, where you see complete sides of the object depending on where its motion. If its motion is towards you, the observer, or moving away from the observer, you'll see these very dynamic changes. And the same thing we've been able to document is with radar. Having the same weird propagation of signal around it, and we've had some odd radar returns, based upon this effect, which is causes late returns of the radar signal, and in some cases earlier returns. And it's we're seeing the same thing with lidar. It's affecting every one of these, pretty much everything in the electromagnetic spectrum that
This particular dead fish cheese spread, I really like his comments. He's been a good commentator through the several months I've been around. I like this guy. Don't tell him I said that; it'll swell his fat head. But he says he's seen an orb, and he is suggesting that it's a huge crystal or some kind of a material like that, and the flickering of the light within the crystal, because the flick, and then this gentleman is saying that the flickering is the propulsion system. Would that kind of, yes, the orb is the engine, they're saying. Would that kind of be in line with what you're seeing? Would that help explain this idea of the distorting, the gravitational lensing?
Well, both those perspectives are interesting, because if you have a polyhedral shaped object, it's got a multifaceted flat, multiple flat faces of multiple flat planes. You can certainly cause a glinting of light, almost like a disco ball appearance. So you can have that lighting effect. And then, of course, you can have the same lighting effect with a gravitational lensing.
Right.
So they're both interesting, and they both may be occurring, most likely occurring at the same time.
Yeah, and you get a prismatic effect. It's possible that you're separating different wavelengths of light at that point, depending on the angles themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, white light's going to come back at a certain angle. Red light one extreme, blue light on the other extreme. They all have their own angle of incidence. So that's going to be, you'll be able to see. Looking through like a polarizing filter, and you can see these changes. But we're looking at something that's even more specific than that, and that's this very defined blue and red, on the object. You can get that kaleidoscope effect, but what we're seeing is that seems like in the direction of travel. That's when these colors are well defined.
Yeah. But the crystalline idea, it's about a crystal-like structure. I mean, that's an interesting point. It's a great point, because these objects appear to be very reflective.
And more orbs are showing up now. I mean, that seemed to be the big deal.
Right.
And I've got these guys, the Sky people. This is Artie, Six Killer Clark, and then the Space Age Indians. She's been interviewing different peoples and their experiences with seeing either craft and or beings, and the beings have helped them out in one way or another. And they are discussing the different ideas of the beings being in line with being energy, not so physical, but the energy does affect the surrounding around them when they show up. And there's some who postulate in some of these accounts. I mean, they don't know, but when they're healed, they're healed. And they say, look, all I can say is I was sick this way before I met this thing, and then I'm doing better now. My suggestion is, my idea is that it has something to do with energy, obviously, because that's ultimately what we are. Like Tesla said, it's all vibration,
Right.
Talking frequencies here.
Yep. So, frequencies, wavelengths. Yep. It's so I wanted to say something on the last person that
sure.
and this is just eluding me right now. It'll come back to me. I'll bring it up in the conversation.
It's a senior moment.
Yeah, it's a senior moment. Unfortunately,
Hey, we're all having those now.
but yeah, we're getting closer and closer to it.
More often than not.
Here's to senior moments.
Yes.
You gotta love it.
Yeah. So we did, like I said, there was some aspects of this conference that we had some good presentations,
and then others not so great. There were others that were kind of it was kind of a circular. There was others that were kind of more of a circular discussion. It's the same kind of things that came up in past conferences, and it's not very proactive in our opinion. It's sticking to the same. It's sticking to talking points or past,
right. And folks want to know more. I mean, they want to know basically, what they're seeing on a day-to-day basis. They want to know what they're, what these experiences are at times. It's, and I think that, you can go down a rabbit hole the wrong way, and it's, you're digging up something that, I don't think sheds any more light on what we're trying to discover here, and certainly doesn't help towards any kind of disclosure of any sort.
Right, and it's just like Valiant Loki here is saying. He said, "Well, I've observed a group of orbs moving in unison in a slow lifting type motion as if riding waves, dipping down, rising up repeatedly. Have others observed this type of motion?" Did you hear anything in the conference about stuff like that?
Not really. I mean, it's actually he's describing some of the some behaviors we've seen, flight behaviors that we saw.
Oh,
it's similar.
Yeah. With these observations, especially some of the instrumented data is reflecting this too.
Yeah.
It's
interesting that the orbs are flying together in a coordinated group in some instances.
Yes, and we've seen this formation.
It's just a singular orb.
Right. And moving forward, we've actually changed some of the parameters of our equipment, and we also knew we needed to look at much more detail at certain wavelengths, because we're trying to define certain characteristics that we've been seeing on a somewhat regular basis out there. It's but in order to do that, we have to start having real measurements on these particular wavelengths of light, how often they are occurring during the complete observation, what is changing, what is producing, of course, that distortion that folks are seeing all the time, that the objects themselves are not really clear, even though we can focus on an aircraft or something else out there, another reference that seems to be extremely clear within the focal plane of the camera. So this is something that we want to explore going forward, and of course that stuff is expensive.
Are you able to be getting several minutes of video on objects so that you can do those kind of tests?
We do at times, but we need more. We need more of it, and some of these observations we need closer observations as well. And this is something that we're actually.
Can you do some tests like you're describing from someone else's video, or is it stuff you guys
that
have?
Helps that helps. We of course we have to vet the video as well.
Sure. Of course.
And that's become a real problem with CGI and so forth. It's we want to know of course that the source we're looking at is a good source. It's a reputable source.
Right.
And we do get some really good, we get some pictures, we get videos from the public and law enforcement as well, where, we can put a little bit more, at times, put a little more trust in that. But on our own, we want to do a targeted study going forward. It's like if somebody does have a case where they're seeing these objects close and personal, those are the cases we'd like to examine. We'd even go out there and do a field trip, in order to take our data, take our instruments and gather up some data on it. It's we believe that we have enough instruments and enough where the instruments themselves have enough resolution where we can get much more a definitive result as far as what we're looking at, and some of the, of course, the paper that we wrote on this gravitational lensing. You know, we want to explore that a lot further, and the only way we can do that is like I said, is up close personal data where, you know, these folks are seeing it on a somewhat regular basis.
Well, the other thing is,
you might have this issue too that Dead Fish Cheese Spread says. He said, I got it on video too, but it messed with the video a little bit.
Yes.
Now, you guys have had that experience.
Yes.
He's not just bluffing here, making stuff up.
Many
You've
times.
actually told me, hey, this stuff messes with your equipment.
well, that's the thing. We're using really good equipment. We're using hyperspectral equipment.
And you're in a Faraday cage in your
right. Yes. A lot of it is shielded. I mean, they're in metal enclosures. And you know, there are times that you know, even with the metal enclosures that we're still having, you know, certain issues with the, you know, battery life and that sort of thing, you know.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the thing out in the field. This is not that's the problem with working out in the field in these kind of environments. Is this is not a repeatable? It's not a replica. It's not a phenomenon we can that's repeatable, like in
a laboratory
environment.
Setting,
yeah, it's very random. Like I said, when we have it,
those are the challenges.
You know, and of course we've been fortunate that we've used the best cutting edge instrumentation. In fact, we're using hyperspectral equipment. We caught some really great data, but there are even some of that great data and high magnifications of looking at these objects. I mean, they have still managed to keep themselves out of focus, which is interesting.
Hey, let me ask you a question. My good friend, Project 708 UFO Research, says, thank you. I use the multispectral Hick micro Habrock binocular. Are you guys?
Yeah, I've heard of it. You know, this is you know, some of the stuff is really expensive. I mean, it's you know, we've looked.
Well, these guys seem to be half serious about looking at stuff too. So that's cool. We have more than one set of eyes on all of this.
Yes,
with good equipment. So thank you, Project 708. Thanks for letting us know what you're using.
And just another note is, you know, we're talking about the binocular. You know, we actually have a broadcast spectra data that we get from one of our cameras, which is mounted on a binocular, and you see that center reflector there.
And what is that?
That's a radio spectrometer.
That's a radio spectrometer.
Okay. What's that?
It's actually mounted on a binocular. What we're trying to do is trying to get a targeted observation on an object and look at that spectral data from 190 nanometers on up to almost 1200 nanometers. So we're covering the UV spectrum, A, B, and C, on up to shortwave infrared. So we're covering a large area, plus of course the visible as well. So a lot of a lot of the spectra that's being examined is just visible light spectra. We're looking beyond that. We're looking in the infrared and the UV.
Yeah, we're trying to get a full spectral fingerprint using spectroscopy.
Right. Okay, here we go. You guys might be able to help us answer this too. FPUG asks, please explain what is the difference, or that there is a difference between multispectral and hyperspectral cameras.
Right. Yeah. So multispectral, that covers the gamut of everything. You're looking multispectral data. You're looking at let's say we're looking at, you know, most of the electromagnetic spectrum. Hyperspectral data might be that we're looking at the infrared, but we're not just looking at the infrared. We're looking at the high order infrared. We're looking at shortwave infrared, midband infrared, and long wave,
and much greater bandwidth, much greater resolution.
Right. So if you were looking at one aspect of it, like the infrared, for instance, we have hyperspectral cameras to do that. Mm-hmm. Or if we're looking at multispectral, we want to look at everything. We want to look at everything in the electromagnetic spectrum.
And that can actually bring us into some of the other speakers at the conference.
Right.
There was
This has been just exactly what I was hoping it was be. I love the scientific aspect. I like the details. I like the variation, etc. This is spectacular. This is the nuts and bolts of ufology.
Yes.
And we gotta have it, you know. Every now and then I'll drift off with some of my videos, like I just did recently on maybe one of the so-called spiritual aspects or the paranormal aspects or whatever. And people almost freak out. They say, "Oh my gosh, dude, you're going off the deep end." I said, "No, I'm just studying all angles of this thing. And hang on, I've got the Tedesco brothers coming back. We're doing the nuts and bolts as well." So
right, and we're trying to give a researcher's perspective on it. You know,
absolutely.
And using our specialty, engineering.
Okay, hold your thought real quick. Let me share this. Project 708 is asking Tedesco brothers, what is the best detector from your equipment for detecting in the mountains? I'm living in the Alps. Ooh, does that make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, altitude definitely makes a difference. You know, it's you know, so you got to be careful with certain lenses and you know, even you know, long wave infrared. You know, some of it, some are uncooled and some are cooled systems. You got to watch the altitude with that because if you have a cooled system, that can affect how the camera operates. You also have of course, the environmental conditions that that can cause some interesting artifacts with those cameras as well.
Okay. So some of those cameras can cause artifacts, you're saying?
Yes. So
that's because of the altitude?
Yeah, and it's something like that. It's like, you know, from that altitude, you know, there's equipment, and there's different grades of equipment too. There's military grade, there's commercial grade, you know,
laboratory grade.
Yeah, laboratory grade.
So do you really think there's that much difference between the military grade and the stuff they sell us public, though? When they say military grade, they're not using that as just a sales pitch, are they? Do you really think they're that much better quality?
No. Well, we've found ways around that. Except we have equipment grades that are equal to a lot of that equipment.
Right, and some of them are military grade type sensors.
Yeah, we military grade sensors, they're laboratory grade, and it's laboratory grade's the same thing.
Right, or laboratory grade sense, I should say. You know, it's
okay. I just want to know, so if I to buy something that's going to be another $1,000, I want it to be worth that much more.
Right. You know, and you know, the reliability of the equipment too. You know, I mean, there are some cheap sensors out there. They may perform within a certain range. But under certain conditions, they're you know, the performance can be
and it's actually the lower grade equipment, like what John's talking about in the mountain altitudes, which probably more affected. Like, so we're using high quality equipment.
Yeah, and those sudden changes in altitude too can affect the equipment.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah.
But if you're talking about somebody who lives in the mountains and like I said, it's maintained, it's not like you're suddenly changing.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff, you know, like in any environment, it's got to be conditioned. You know, you got to keep it in the environment for a certain period of time. A change in the environment. If you let's say you were down in the Caribbean. You know, I mean, how many of us have taken our cameras and, you know, it's if you're using the early DVD recorders that were in these cameras, they would fail to operate because the humidity build up on the disc. You know, so you know, obviously, you know, the environment, you know, does play a big role here, big factor.
Sure. All right, thanks for answering that. I know there's I've got several in the comments who are, and the UFO Busters from Australia is talking about his videos and recordings too. There's several people who are doing this, which is really cool. That's because the more eyes, the better off. I mean, we'll be able to use the context to a much greater degree. Okay, so I hope I didn't derail you too. I just wanted to get that question. What else did you learn at this? What was it called? The SCU?
Yes, it's the SCU 2025 conference.
What's SCU mean?
Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And this is a group that was put together by a researcher named Robert Powell and Richard Hoffman. They put this together, and they bring in various scientists as members and engineers and other kinds of researchers.
Okay.
But, they've been doing it since 2000, maybe 7 or something like that. I'm not sure.
Oh, that long. So they're established. They've got a
they're established, and they've some of the members have been in MUFON and that sort of thing. It's you know,
nice.
I mean, you know, I mean, it's important. Of course it's important for this, you know, for this kind of research and you know, certainly to put a light on it. there's pros and cons with that too. As far as
There's definitely pros and cons.
yeah.
Yeah. All
But
right.
there was, his other speakers was Dr. Laura Demine. She's a physicist, postdoctoral research fellow for the Center of Astrophysics at Harvard. We had worked with her in the Galileo project. We actually had her out in the field 3 nights with 2 other scientists from Galileo project. Now, what she was presenting was the Harvard's Galileo project platform, their fixed platform, and they had recently published a paper about called commissioning of 500,000 objects that they've observed, or they documented. Nothing that stood out as anything other than prosaic.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it groundbreaking.
No, the problem with our problem with it is, the presentation she gave is called the Foundational AI Model and IR Commissioning. So they're still establishing a baselines of what they consider anomalous to prosaic. I think she mentioned it'll probably take them another 2 years to qualify what data they accept as anomalous. Our issue with that is some of the equipment they use, I would say it doesn't. There's probably an issue with, there actually is an issue with resolution and bandwidth with some of the equipment they're using, especially the Dalek system, which is an IR system. It doesn't have the bandwidth resolution of the equipment we're using. Let's put it that way. It's everything from magnification of the objects to resolution on the long wave on their thermal systems. They don't have enough repeatability in some, and they're using multispectral cameras, but not hyperspectral cameras, which is what we're using.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a good way to define it. It's certain ranges are lacking in there.
There's limitations.
Yeah, there's definitely limitations in it, and it's when we were actually on the Galileo project, we did mention some of these concerns and so forth, and hopefully in the future that this they're going to address some of these issues, because I think when you're having over 500,000 observations and you have not even one object that you can question. I know they're still going through the data and that sort of thing, but
that's a lot.
It tells me that there's definitely some drawbacks to the data that you're taking, or something's being ignored. And sometimes you have to look outside that prosaic box.
Yeah, and because of the lower resolution, they're looking for objects. They're looking for almost star-like objects that are doing something in kinematics, something unusual kinematically, and they're limited. They're ignoring things that are linear. They're moving in linear motions because they consider those satellites or planes or the typical things. I think they have ability to look at some biomass. I think what they're looking for in anomaly wise, they're looking for something that looks like has a sinusoidal pattern, which something that's doing like a wave, something resembles something like a flight path like that. That's unusual, more unusual, different from an airliner or for a jet, or the flight path of a jet.
Right, I think the biggest issue with that is this the range of the objects. It's determining its range.
And that's a big thing. So
that's with the present system they have, they're not able to do that. You can do triangulation. Hopefully, you can align an object with under multiple sites, but there are certain detection methods that I know passive radar is that's been a bit of a drawback pretty much for everybody. As far as being able to use that technology, it's coming of age. It's at some point I know some folks are using it. There was a speaker that did speak very well of a passive radar system that he's using, and he's got quite a bit of experience doing this. Which I think will be the software will be available at some point shortly for people that want to use passive radar. The drawbacks of passive radar is the same drawbacks you're going to have with active radar, though, too. I understand the FCC issues and that sort of thing, the licensing requirements. We had to jump through hoops to get certain licensing for offshore radar that we're using, marine-based radar systems. But there's also there's other radar systems that can be used. They're active radar, portable use radar that react within the field of view of the cameras, which is more than adequate for what researchers need. That's readily available. But for whatever reason, there's such a tremendous focus on this, and I think that will eventually have to change. Active radar is tried, it's true, it works well, it's and there are some requirements, yes, under the FCC, yes, there are licensing requirements, but there are also when you got an academic institution that can certainly gain access to a weather radar, let's say, for meteorological use. There's many universities that are using them, and they can certainly do it as an academic institution, but it's
for research purposes.
For research purposes,
Yeah.
It's a matter of spending the money, is using that money wisely,
And here's the drawback again. They were going to rely on passive radar. The passive radar isn't where it needs to be, so they don't really have the data on passive radar.
Now, what's the difference between passive radar and active radar? What do you mean?
So passive radar uses an already available infrastructure, the transmitters. If you want to lighten something, if you want to produce an illuminating beam, you're relying on radio towers, you're relying on satellites, you're relying on sources of transmission that are already out there. What the passive system does is it's a series of SDR radios that are used to look at these multiple reflections of these objects from an object and compare it to the original source. That can be easily done through a system of software, but it's noisy. There is a lot of clutter with these methods, and there's algorithms available. The software is kind of tough to get right now. It's there is some issues with that. It's not just open source. It's although I hear that there may be, but I don't see any of that. But it's not as clear and it's not as detailed as an active radar system that has been out there for a long period of time. That can be used. You might not have the range at times, but again, you got to define what you're looking at. It's if you're looking at something that has an anomalous flight pattern, it's there is ADSB that can be looked at. There's available NexRad radar system. You can look at with a radar to look at some of this data that is readily available.
Yeah.
But the passive radar systems, more or less, most of it's like a PhD project. It's there's a lot of people working on it, but unless the software is well defined and available, it's there's a big drawback to that.
Yeah, it's not where it needs to be.
Yeah.
And let me go further. When John's saying passive radar, you're talking about John says the infrastructure. They're taking advantage of the infrastructure that's already available. You have radio towers that have broadcast antennas. So what you're doing is you have a receiver. You're picking up the signals of that broadcast between the two towers, between two radio towers. And if an object crosses between that broadcast, it creates an interference pattern.
Okay.
So it blocks the transmissions of those wavelengths going between one tower to another, and it produces an interference. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for an interference.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
it's very passive. Active is we're using an antenna. We're actually sending a microwave signal bouncing off the object, and getting return. So we're getting range, we're getting distance, we're getting mass size, flight characteristics.
Okay.
Right,
Interesting.
right. Yeah,
Okay,
and a hard-nosed researcher. I mean, you know, there is, you know, you can contact the FCC. You have to go through the paperwork, you know, to get an experimental license for it, you know, for this particular kind of research. They look at the area, of course, and see whether or not, you know, it's going to interfere with you know, if you're near a tower, you know, an airport tower, and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
You know, those things, you know, the process.
They've got to keep public safety.
It's not a clean process, but it can be obtained. You know, like I said, for researchers that are out there.
And this is, and like I said, this is the drawback for the Galileo project, is because they're not, the passive radar is not where it needs to be, so they're not using radar at the moment. They have a problem ranging these objects, where it is, distance, elevation. So what they want to do is the next step, they want to triangulate. They want to set up systems in 2 different areas or 2 different states and try to triangulate to try to find the range and distance, that kind of thing. The thing is, what we're doing is, since we're using active radar, we get that information right away through the active radar.
Right. You're almost one step less work.
Right.
With
yes,
active radar.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
it simplifies those
a lot less trigonometry. So I'm going with active radar.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, here lies the issue, though. I mean, you have groups like SCU, you have academic institutions like Harvard, you know, the Galileo Project. Us as researchers, you know, we're open source. We're an open book. You know, if they wanted to work with us, they certainly have use of the radar system. They certainly have use of those, those applications, those devices, those instruments that we have available. And there might be instruments that we need that another research group might have. The idea is to work together, and so far this is still a challenge. This is a huge challenge.
It is.
You know, it's like first of all, recognition, and the other thing is working together. You know, not working in silos. And I brought this up many times, that we're still working in silos. SCU is still working in a silo, although they Rich Hoffman brought up a lot of a statement about working together going forward toward the disclosure.
In practice, it's not happening.
It's not happening in practice. It's we're still this conference it's interesting, and it's
they said there were some interesting speakers which we brought up, and of course there was a speaker named Gene Greniker, who's a radar specialist. That was a very interesting presentation, because he talked about the use of radar. And the thing is, when we're talking about radar, this is something that frustrates us, is as he talked about how important the use of radar is, from active to passive, and he did a great presentation of both versions of it. But then again, SCU the groups like SCU, the Galileo Project, the Sol Foundation, all know we're out there. And with the Nightcrawler system is using active radar, we're using hyperspectral equipment, which none of these other groups are using. And you'll be hard pressed to ever find us mentioned or brought up, or even provided an invitation to present any data at these conferences, these kinds of things, which to us is frustrating, because it's
that brings us right to this question: have you been asked to testify before Congress, and if not, would you be willing to?
We would be willing to.
So we certainly,
and that possibility has come up.
Yes,
it has come up.
Okay. Good, because your data would be remarkably helpful to Congress, I would suspect.
Yeah,
right.
And we're cooperating with the federal agencies, so we're working.
Yeah, a number of.
We're working alongside federal agencies.
Right,
sure.
right.
Yeah.
But again, it's with this recent pushback with the government and so forth, it's if we're moving towards disclosure, these groups these principal groups that have been in it for a while, SCU and Galileo, and so they got to start working together. Everybody's concerned about funding issues, which is huge. That's a big issue. It's expensive to be out there. It's expensive to conduct research investigation.
The problem is this competition for the funding, and so they focus on themselves and seem to blacklist other groups The other thing, it seems to be ego. There seems to be academic, institutional politics about, and all these kinds of issues. Like, to me, is it's tiring, it's frustrating, and
It's defeating.
it's self-defeating.
Yeah.
So like, unless there's much better constructive collaboration.
Yeah, we need to somehow get that really important point across.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it is self-defeating for everyone,
Right.
and so
Right.
that's
and they control the narrative. They set the stage. People like Avi Loeb and people like Rich Hoffman and Robert Powell. You got to bring, if you want to focus attention on this stuff, you got to bring this stuff to limelight. You got to bring it to the public, and whatever we can offer, whatever any other group can offer. There's a lot of groups out there that are conducting research,
and they're growing in number.
Yes, and you don't hear from them, and that's a problem.
That's an issue. That's an issue.
Yeah.
Well, I have I can't remember who it was that got me involved. Oh, yes, I do. It was one of my patrons. He got me involved with you, and I'm really glad he did, because you're bringing an important element. Well, you're bringing several important elements to this, and I know my audience is always really appreciative when I mention that. Yeah, I've got the Tedescos, and this is part of the. I'm just talking to my audience real quick. This is part of our series that we're doing. It is important in this series. The Tedescos have the nuts and bolts in science, and we'll continue talking about that. But there is also an academic aspect to this that ought to be and is being met, because the fact is, every one of us, all combined, are a huge minority group.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people out there that have no idea about UFOs.
Yeah.
They have no idea the government's been looking into it. They have no idea Congress has had hearings. They have no idea the Tedescos are applying scientific inquiry into this. And the really weird part is, they don't give a flip. They have their lives to live. Well, I mean, we all do, every one of them. So, but I'm not trying to toot your horn for you, but I'm going to. I agree with Heiser here. The Tedescos are setting the bar. Now we just need to get word out that this
let's get the word out about that bar.
bar is for all of us, and we need to work together to help elevate that bar even more.
And thank you, Heiser.
Yes, absolutely. We all want to get to disclosure. We want to know what this stuff is, and that's
and like if people,
unilateral approach.
If there's blacklisting going on, which appears to be, that doesn't help. It's not fair to the public, because the public wants to know what these things are. There's a good percentage of the public that at least wants to know that. Yeah. And we want to make sure we're transparent, and everybody else needs to be. And like I said, if there's new data sets that are coming around, like we've presented new data sets, it should be readily available and discussed among academia.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So here's a question. Do you think the UFOs are aware of you filming them? I can answer that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, based on what you've told me.
Right. Yeah.
How do you suggest, how do you know you think they're aware of you filming them?
Well, we've had that incident we talked about that we had in August 2022, where we actually had a close encounter with something that disabled our legs temporarily and seemed to surveil our equipment.
Right. Yeah, that was early in our research. That's something that we still to this day it's kind of hard to wrap your head around.
We're still trying to
but
I was going to say that's that would still be bugging me.
Yeah. And they appear, and they seem to show an awareness. They appear.
I think the story that you told, and you showed the video. Now,
yes.
Look, in previous shows, just for my audience sake, or anyone new to my channel who is watching this particular show right now, in one of my previous interviews with these guys, it's been 3 or 4 times ago, we have the video. They showed us the video, and I put it up, that there was a UFO orb playing hide and seek with you guys while you were calibrating your instrument, wasn't it? Yeah. Every time they went to calibrate the instrument, the UFO slid behind a sign on the beach and hid. And then when they went back down to join the UFO, it came back out.
Yeah, we nicknamed it the peekaboo orb.
I think that is so cool. That is my favorite UFO story. I've told a lot of people that when they say, "Yeah, UFOs are fake," I've got a video for you to watch.
Yeah, I mean, we've observed them and documented them, and with multimodal means, we've documented them actually hovering over the water or hovering over the beach sand and disappearing.
Right. Within a lot of this stuff has been within about 500 meters.
Yeah.
Very, very relatively close. So there are times that we're up close and personal.
And it's all multi-layered data. Did something that came up at the conference. They were talking
when
about.
you say multi-layered data, you're meaning like the FLIR,
Yes.
UV,
Yes.
the radar, the actual video,
Yep.
any kind of noise. So it's not just you guys taking a quick picture or whatever. It's several different parts of your equipment that also give you a different angle of the data. And you can take all of that and put it together in a profile.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly what we're doing. Yep. And that's why
that's much better than just a fuzzy video.
Right. It's not a single.
But I will say one thing, and while I've got you here, I need your backup here. So I'm going to put you guys on the spot. Let me ask you a question. Just because I take a fuzzy video of a UFO, is that evidence that it's not valid and real? Why are people making a big deal about the fuzziness of video anyway?
And they shouldn't be. And I think we brought that up on the show. We actually brought that up on your program before. It depends on how it's been taken. It's if it's being taken by long wave infrared, which you're getting a heat signature, it's going to be fuzzy. It may be fuzzy. Sometimes, depending on the resolution of the thermal imaging, it can be sharp, but it can be, and this can be fuzzy by other means. It could be distorting the atmosphere around it, which is where we're seeing.
Right, and
that's right, exactly. So that's almost. It appears to me like that's almost more in line with an excuse not to accept the evidence. Because it's like the analogy that just bopped into my head the other night during a video recording I was making. If I take a fuzzy picture of Mount Rushmore, man, you can't say that's proof Mount Rushmore isn't real.
Right.
The focus of the camera has nothing to do with the reality of what it's showing.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Yeah, but you would expect stuff like that to be in focus and so forth. It's but it really depends on, I mean, if you have an atmospheric, a cloud formation and this and that, and the reflective characteristics of the sunlight, that can definitely influence what you're seeing. These objects, many times they're not in focus. Many times they're not detailed, and it's simply the nature of the beast. I mean, this is something that we've encountered even when we believe that the object is within the same distance, same range as something else that we use as reference, an aircraft or something else that is in focus. The object has a tendency not to be.
That makes a question. Why is the sun got to focus compared to an object at the same distance, and a known object like an aircraft that we can see fine detail.
Right. And I mean, in some case, if you're using a cell phone camera and, you got the high compression schemes in these cameras, if it's moving, if there's a lot of motion, it's distorted. It will be distorted. The object's more stationary, of course, you get a little bit more detail.
The other thing, if it's generating a plasma sheath around it, that'll distort the image as well.
Right. Absolutely.
And they seem to be, some of them seem to be ionizing the air or developing a plasma sheath.
Exactly. And I've actually mentioned that to people before. Planetary HQ says, do you guys believe that any of the objects you filmed are man-made?
It's possible. It's possible.
If there's some advanced technology, of course, if it's some kind of extremely classified project. I don't know why they would flying off the shore for what purpose. There are test ranges for that, so that's kind of weird.
Yes, but during the observations in November of 2022,
I mean, there were objects that we wondered if we saw drone-like objects along with these orb-like objects, and we wondered if the drone-like objects were some kind of surveillance operation by some classified equipment that was being used.
Right.
You know, we weren't. That's something we weren't sure.
So that was questionable. You know, it's and then of course all these drone incursions that we've been having over the last few years. Actually, it's earlier than that, but specifically New Jersey and that sort of thing. It's we don't know. We simply don't know.
But so we're like says our objective is to determine what's prosaic, what's not. We're looking at all the prosaic we know is out there.
Sure.
And we're eliminating that. So what's left is the anomalies.
Sure.
Could there is there a possibility of some highly advanced classified project that's being tested? It's possible. I would tend to doubt it's being tested at all hours of the night off the shore of Long Island.
Right.
And not at a test range.
Yeah. So here's the question. Well, it's not a question, it's a statement, but I want to elaborate on this. X-band and K-band hits. What is the significance of the X-band and the K-band? I see this talked about periodically.
Right.
And why is this such a big deal? Or is it? Is someone misunderstanding what bandwidths will tell us?
Right. Well, that's a significant bandwidth. You got X-band, which is roughly about 9.4 gigahertz. That's marine-based radar. Some of the Robin units that's used by Homeland Security and law enforcement. The portable radar systems will use X-band radar. The K-bands are more of what you find in police surveillance, speed surveillance, and that sort of thing, where the frequencies are in excess of 24 gigahertz. You got 24 gigahertz, 36 gigahertz, and they're even going higher than that. It's radar systems as high as 60. K-band is different. There's KA band, there's K-band. KA band is 36 gigahertz. K-band is 24. And we use those particular radar units because we're looking at smaller objects and more detail. There's a greater reflective characteristic to the K-band units. Simply because
it will reveal better detail with the smaller objects.
Yes. So if we're looking at smaller objects or biomass, if you want to determine the speed of a baseball, you'd use a K-band system in order to do that.
Because those small
objects will kick off the K-band.
Yes.
And
they're much more reflective.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that's cool. All right. All right. I'm trying to see what else. Anyway,
I just want to say something too about this K-band. You'll see a lot of that too in these sports equipment too. These sports radar systems that are readily available now. And some of them are actually pretty decent. They're still pricey. Some of it's still pricey. I mean, it's there are radar systems out there made by Stalker, which are really good radar systems. And they'll detect speeds. Some cases, in greater than 500 miles per hour, but that's going to depend on its angle, tangent to the object itself. At an object that's completely at a 90 degrees, you don't hear any Doppler change. But anything more than that, an object is moving, and I've gotten high-speed aircraft with the Doppler radars that typically are designed to run around 300 miles per hour, and you'll hear these objects based on that angle that are going in excess of 500.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. All right. Well, I think we pretty much covered everything, haven't we? That you wanted to. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I mean, there were other speakers here. Right? Kevin Newth, Dr. Kevin Newth, gave a presentation. We are on his latest paper.
Yes,
Our work.
yes, his paper was just published. There was a number of authors to it, and we're on it as well. But that was recently published. I think there was one by
Matthew Zedegas.
Matthew Zedegas. UAPX got their paper published. The research that they had done out in Catalina Island on the West Coast. And hats off to them.
Yeah, they did a pilot study out there with the use of modern infrared equipment and FLIR cameras and things like that.
They had a number of thermal cameras out there. Yeah.
Cool.
And I mean, there was another conference. That's probably for another time. There was let's see, the French air.
There's an acronym for it.
It was done in Europe. It was the conference, and it was involved some of the researchers here. Looks like it was a French aeronautics and
they called the 3AF.
Yeah.
Conference.
Yeah, French Aeronautics Association.
Right. And they had a number of speakers there that presented material about the detection capabilities and so forth of UAP. Unfortunately, we didn't get an invite to that one.
And again, pros and cons of what we read. We didn't attend it, but we saw some of the transcripts and maybe some couple of video clips from it. Pros and cons. Some of the things they presented. Other things they presented, we would respectfully disagree.
Right.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
No.
That's all good. That's part of the give and take of the whole deal. So
Right.
Exactly.
It's like I've told people, I say, every one of my guests, except for you guys, of course, I've had disagreements with. I don't agree with everything ever said. But on the other hand, there is so much that I just don't know. And so I can't possibly agree to everything or disagree with a whole lot yet. This is part of an ongoing research.
Right. Exactly. There are lots of unknowns, and anybody who pushes a narrative that they're experts at everything or
don't believe it.
Yeah, don't ever believe it.
There's a lot of folks out there claiming to be experts.
Yeah, so some of the things we heard presented that we, like I said, even the SCU conference, we would totally disagree with.
Yeah.
I really like you guys. Don't you ever come out and say that.
No.
I will no longer be able to.
You didn't hear from us.
All right. Hey, thanks to the audience. You've been great. Thank you for all your comments, questions. We love trying to trip up the Tedescos, and so far they are 100% in totally showing you that they've got the goods so far.
All right.
So we appreciate you guys. It's always fun to have you on. We're going to do a lot more together. We've got this series we're working on, and can we somehow give the audience a teaser real quick? What are we going to try to talk about next?
Okay, so John and I were discussing this for the past week. We want to do one program on engineers versus scientists and who they are and what they bring to the table. And it's not a hierarchy of scientists here and engineers here. It's equal. There's an equal here.
Footing.
We got to forget the hierarchy that's being portrayed out there. There's a specialty that both of them do, and they're on the same playing field. So we want to go over that. We're going to cover that.
Nice. I'm looking forward to that one. So there's a teaser.
Right, and we also want to do a deep dive in the instrumentation.
And what constitutes as physical evidence in our book.
Right.
Oh yes.
Mm-hmm.
Hot damn! I mean, dang. Yeah, absolutely. Now there's two teasers, and I'm more excited than my audience.
And the other one is we're thinking about is doing the different hypotheses and going over that. And our perspective on those hypotheses, like the extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial, crypto-terrestrial, or foreign technology.
Yeah. So what we're trying to say to the audience is we have a lot of really good stuff coming down the pipeline, and we're not gonna stretch this out to just once a month. We're gonna try to make it, I mean, these guys have a lot of work to do too, and I'm still working full time, but we are going to try to keep it fairly somewhat tight. At worst, hopefully, if we can manage this once every other week. My ideal would be once a week, but we'll see. We can't guarantee anything. We've got to be a little flexible. For instance, we scheduled an hour earlier today, and we had to put that off an hour, and we appreciate the audience's patience too. But yeah, it sounds to me like we've got a heck of a month or two coming up that we're going to get some really cool.
Real big and interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
Certainly a lot to talk about.
Absolutely.
The things that aren't being talked about right now.
Right, yes.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, you guys. And remember to hit the like, subscribe, share this video with everybody. The Tedescos really just continue to demonstrate that, one, there is the nuts and bolts aspect to this. That's not even questionable from my take. The second thing they're showing us is it's possible to have fun. It's possible to make this subject interesting. You see, I don't know if they're bots or if they're real people in the comments to so many videos that they're saying, oh, this is becoming boring. Are you kidding me, man? There is no more exciting subject than this, and the Tedescos bringing that out.
So, and we'll go down a rabbit hole on that. So
yeah, absolutely. So thanks once again. We will catch you guys on flip side. Everybody out there in UFO land, have a happy Father's Day, and we'll catch up.
Enjoy Father's Day.
Enjoy.
Yeah.